Awesome. So welcome if you're joining us. Glad to have you. We'll get started in a second. And so feel free, there is a Q&A icon down at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to drop a question and we'll get to it in today's conversation. So we'll get started here in a second. Awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone and good evening. My name is Tommy Messenger and I'm one of the founders of K-12 Impact Communities and Academy. We're so glad you're here with us tonight, wherever West Coast, East Coast. I'm also joined today by my wonderful co-host, Tom Davis. So thanks, Tom, for being here and helping facilitate tonight's conversation. Thank you and appreciate you guys joining us for the current state of education sales and marketing, what it takes to win in a tougher market, a conversation designed to help education leaders and industry professionals better understand the K-12 landscape and what it takes to succeed in an increasingly competitive environment. We're joined tonight by two incredible leaders. We have Jill Lamont, Vice President Education, Evolve Technology, and Mike Fee, Chief Strategy Officer at Unified Track. Jill and Mike, how are you both doing tonight?
Great. Thank you for having us.
I'm good. I'm on the West Coast, so it's not really tonight, but I'm good.
Close to it. And like I said, thanks everyone for tuning in. A huge part of this webinar is your questions. And so you'll see a little question icon at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to just drop any questions and we will get to them in today's conversation. And so, a big part of the webinar is to kind of, go and answer all your questions. So with that being said, let's get started. Today's first question is really focusing with the big picture. So Mike and Jill, what are your thoughts in terms of how has the K-12 market changed over the past couple of years? What have been kind of the major changes you've seen that have had the biggest impact on sales and marketing teams? And maybe we'll start with you, Mike.
Oh, okay. So great to be here. Thanks, Tommy, and thanks, Tom, for having me. This is a lot of fun. Look, two things haven't changed. One is arrive to every call or meeting extremely early. No matter what the environment is, and really, really try not to take sales calls from your car. And if you do have a virtual background, I've learned that one the hard way. I'm in my car today without the virtual background because we're on this special platform. But otherwise, I always try to. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a tough environment. We got the triple threat of the decline in enrollment, some AI backlash, and technology backlash broadly. Ranging from, phone prohibitions in schools to no screen policies. It's a tough time. We can adapt. We can be flexible. I guess my overriding kind of message is now more than ever, building trust is just absolutely crucial. It is harder to build trust today than it has been in the past, but there are still ways to do so.
Jill, what are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with Mike, but I would also add, just with regards to funding, it was a very different world. We were selling into school districts that were getting ESSER funds. And, I would be remiss not to mention that those funds have dried out. And now I think in a lot of cases, at least in districts that I've been working with, they have in many cases hired staff with those funds or created new programs with those funds that they want to maintain. And so they're having to rob Peter to pay Paul, and moving money around in ways that they probably have not had to be so creative in recent years. And, prioritizing their projects is of utmost importance, and everybody has different priorities.
Yep.
So understanding these districts, understanding what their bottom line is, what their budget really looks like, and then what is freed up for new projects. If you're coming in with a totally new solution to them, it might be falling on deaf ears simply because they don't have the funds. And I think it's a very different marketplace than it was even 4 years ago when I came over here to Evolve.
I'll just build on that. Absolutely, Jill. I think that even harder than ultra tight budgets is uncertainty. And what most districts, some states more than others, but districts everywhere are facing is uncertain budgets. It's one thing to know that you're facing some cuts, but if you don't even know, you're probably going to assume the worst. And I've had many districts tell me, love what you have to say, super interesting. We're not doing anything right now, not until things sort themselves out.
Yeah, and I think that plays into the geopolitical situation. I mean, you could extrapolate that out into many different, pieces and parts of what's influencing those decisions.
Yes.
But I think a lot of it is fear and uncertainty, to your point.
Yep.
What kind of approach to what you just said there, Mike, do you think is best? We had a superintendent a couple months back say the companies that stick around during the hard times are the ones we go to when things are budgets free up. So what is the approach when deals are stalling out, it's taking longer, there aren't funds, it's, hey, love what you're doing, but just not yet. What is the best approach?
There's a lot to it, and I bet we could spend the entire time talking about just this. I would start by saying, go slow to go fast. It's, in a sales role, it's really tempting. We all build our funnel and we've got our inputs. And one of the inputs is, the input you can control most easily is just the number of calls, emails, and however you reach out. It's always easy to just pick up the phone one more time, call one more person. I think in this environment, it pays off to do fewer calls, slow down, research the bejesus out of every single call you make. Really understand where they are. Key to trust is understanding their perspective, building true empathy on your part so that they can empathize with you. Slow down, do that research, take time to build that trust. So then when you have a conversation with them, you're fully informed about their perspective. I'd start with that.
Yeah, and I had shared with you all earlier, in my former role as an assistant superintendent, I've only been on the private side for a handful of years. And before that, I was on cabinet on the school side. And the number of emails and the number of messages that really had no clue what my role even was and were completely tone deaf to what my day-to-day activities were. I mean, taking that time to really engage in a partnership to understand, the main reason that I worked with the companies I worked with when I was in the seat was I worked with those companies that asked me questions, not those ones who prescribed me solutions or seemed to know exactly what I needed, right? But those people who honored the work that we were doing and had spent the time to understand it and really asked probing questions to understand it better, to come up with the solution with me, but alongside me. And that can take time. These are slow sales cycles right now. You have to be ready for that. There has to have an understanding from management all the way down that this is a different time to sell in schools.
This sounds obvious, but Jill, I mean, whole books have been written on, relationship selling or whatever we want to call it, consultative selling, many books. But I'm surprised at how many kind of stand and deliver sales pitches I still see, leading with your features, leading with your product, not listening, not taking time to truly, again, do that research, really understand, put yourself in their shoes. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And, I happened to be in a school district when we experienced the worst. We did have a mass casualty incident in 2021. 4 of our students were taken from us by a student gunman. And I was still in active lockdown. If our first gunshots were at 12:51, it couldn't have been 3 o'clock or more generously, maybe 3:30 p.m., where we were still fearful of a potential second gunman that luckily did not exist, but quite a bit of fear. And my messages coming in my phone are probably equal parts family, honey, are you okay? Where are you? And the other half are vendors saying things like, hey, we heard you've had loss of life on your campus. Have you ever considered our blank? Or if only you'd had our, insert product, this wouldn't have happened. I don't even know what's happened. I'm here and I don't know what's happened, but you're sure somewhere out there that whatever you have would have stopped it. It's insulting, actually, to use a word. It really, to me, felt very insulting. And
Totally
unfortunately, there are a
insulting.
lot of vendors still doing that.
Oh my gosh.
I'm so sorry that was your experience. That's like the worst case of pushing features over outcomes and empathy.
Can I say something too? That's we've got to do a better job of training our reps and our representatives. That we just got to do a better job of that, because what we're putting out there, they don't have a clue. I mean, they're leading, like what Mike said, with features and benefits. They don't care about. They haven't done their homework on the district. They're just coming out they're making us all look bad. So we've got to put out a better product, in my mind. And one thing I would say to the founders of companies and to vice presidents of sales and so forth is, during these tough economic times, give your reps more time. Don't pressurize them now. Like you said, Mike, you need more time to build relationships and get out there and understand how to become a student of the game, and give them some more time. That's the hardest part. as a manager, do you give enough time and leadway and rope for these guys to go out and build those relationships, or you need numbers right now because your board's pounding you for numbers? How do you balance that?
It's a great point. I mean, I said, it's the easiest thing to measure, or easiest thing to control is just make more calls. But I understand why sales reps do that. Probably that's measured. Probably that's incentivized. I'm not sure exactly who's represented in our audience here, sales rep. But if there are sales leaders, be thoughtful about what you're incentivizing your folks to do. It's a lot harder to measure research and trust building, but you're smart. You can figure out ways to do this. You can figure out ways to measure more thoughtfully than just the number of doors your folks knock on, the number of calls they make.
And I would just add, you have to believe in what you're selling, right? Yeah. There has to be integrity in that sale. And if you really believe you have a solution that these schools could benefit from, then play the long game and show them.
Yep.
It's a show me sale right now. Our schools are looking for pilots. They're looking for demos. They want to see it. They want to test it. And they want to know that these products work before they go in front of their school boards and invest in them because of how tight the purse strings are right now.
Yep, absolutely.
One of my favorite lines from a previous webinar, we had a superintendent and she said, "Don't bring me crap," right? Don't bring me something just because. She goes, "You're going to burn the equity we have." And too often we're thinking of funding in terms of like money, but you burn political equity if you're trying to push a bad product just because, you don't believe in it, or, you're pushing features or whatnot. And said, "Bring me something you actually believe in." And so
we should just end the webinar here. Just don't sell crap. That's don't sell crap.
Or maybe it's the time to test your product and you can get a case study out of them. I mean, there are ways to have a symbiotic relationship with potential customers without a sale. And I know that salespeople don't like to hear that, but sometimes along the way, those little breadcrumbs that we're putting out are important to build that trust and to be on site and to understand their buildings and to see what their student body looks like and what their parents are asking for and what their board is asking for. That takes time. These are time intensive sales.
And go ahead, Mike. I was going to say one quick thing. You said it earlier, Michael, is we need. You're going to see a lot more of districts asking you to pilot stuff and put stuff in before they buy anything, right? For sure, you're going to see more and more of that. And performance-based contracts are going to come down the road here as well. If you perform or we don't pay you, you're going to start seeing a lot of that, I think. But to my point is, and Jill talked to this because you were an administrator. If I pilot something, it's just like me buying something anyways. It's going to take the same amount of time and effort to implement it the right way, as opposed to, I like to use the word impact study because I want to get data out of this thing. I'm not going to put a pilot in there. I'm going to use the term impact study to be able to pull data out of it so I can show you that we've had efficacy here. To Mike's point earlier about efficacy, Mike, touch on what you think is important in terms of efficacy. And I really believe that we should start looking at every single thing we buy should have some sort of research study tag to it.
Yeah, I do understand the continuum here, right? It often starts with investors, impatient investors. They're looking to get a return. They want to see growth really rapidly. That passes through executive leadership, sales leadership, onto sales reps. And the answer is go, go, go. And no, we don't have time to invest in some efficacy study. We'd really rather spend the money on go to market. Efficacy studies, however you want to define them, right? This can be formal, full-blown clinical studies, all the way down to just something that proves your point, something you can point to build trust. It's worth spending some time, and it is a go-to-market vehicle. There is nothing like, I would much, much rather have a proof point to point to than some super fancy AI-enabled, sales enablement strategy or tool or something else. It feels like, marking time because you're not actually out there pounding the pavement. You're waiting for that efficacy study to come through, but it's just, I have found it to be worthwhile every time.
And if I can add to that, I'm thinking from the school's perspective, I'm not going to put a pilot in without success criteria.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. What does good look like? Let's all understand what problem I'm trying to solve and make sure that my vendor, my partner really understands my pain point and that we have a common language around what it looks like to do well. And so, I'm not going to put in, from the vendor perspective, I'm not going to put in a product just for free and not know what it means to look good. So what are you looking for? What are you trying to do here? And I think that having that, it could be just a piece of paper keeping us all literally on the same page, but having those success criteria before any kind of pilot or demo is imperative for both sides to understand what good looks like.
the shortcut to efficacy, very broadly defined, used to be, I think in some cases still is, you find that district who has a superintendent or leader who's willing to take a small risk, try something out. You give them favorable pricing, maybe it's free, and you give them a chance to just try it out, and then you go and trumpet it. I am hearing from more and more districts that they actually want to see something that is close, that is more formal. It helps a lot to be able to say the district down the road is using this and they're satisfied with it, and you will be as well. That helps a ton, of course, but that is a bit of a shortcut. And I am hearing more districts saying we need to see actual evidence, not just a reference. Both is best, but if you have to choose, actual evidence.
And one thing I want to add to that I'm preaching to the choir, I know, but I'm telling a lot of folks that I'm advising to ensure efficacy and to ensure fidelity of the implementation, bring on an ambassador from the site that you're working with to be your coach there on the ground. So you don't have to send somebody in there every week. They already have somebody on the ground watching it, and pay that person a stipend. Either it's, Starbucks card, whatever it is, to be on your team, but find a champion teacher going to represent this study and is on feet on the ground for you to give you feedback on what's happening, right or wrong. That's really important. I think that's something that we have to consider more of.
Yep.
Another trend that I'm seeing a lot, Tom, and I didn't run this by you, I wonder your opinion, but I'm seeing a lot of student voice when it comes to particularly safety products. I'm hearing, we're surveying the students, or we're asking the kids how they feel. And as a former educator, I think that's amazing. But as a salesperson, that's a tough market. Some of our sales folks are really concerned about going into a group of student union or student leadership, or some of our school boards have student representatives who ask sometimes the most probing, most difficult questions. I love it. I think it's fantastic as a parent, as a former educator, but I think it's very different for a lot of sellers in the K-12 market, that I might be talking to a kid. I might be trying to help a kid understand why they need my solution. And that's such a paradigm shift, from the private side.
It's a good point.
Great.
So it's great to have some former educators on your staff, because they know how to walk in there. I will say, on October 13th, shameless plug, we're going to have Dr. Julie Evans on for a webinar to talk about impact studies. So if you're listening, that's a great way to, find a way to show efficacy in a pilot or impact study. So we've touched on some of them, but just to highlight a couple more, what are some of the most common mistakes you're seeing in the way companies are approaching schools and districts? I mean, pushing products, pushing features, maybe not leading with empathy. What are some other common mistakes you just see, and maybe you're just like, why are we doing this, that you're noticing companies or reps doing today?
I have something off the top. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Okay, I'll start with a small one. This is going to sound small and cosmetic, but I actually think it's becoming more and more relevant. I wouldn't lead with the term AI. And it's not only semantics, but it's partly semantics. I do believe that the AI backlash in school districts is real. It's not uniform. It's not even pervasive, but it's real. And leading with AI might sound smart to you, the technology company representative, but might be off-putting to school districts. Find better ways to talk about your solution than just AI. Talk about what that actually enables. Maybe you never say AI or artificial intelligence, but if you can talk about the actual value without using those words, you might save yourself some headaches.
I think that's great advice. I was just going to mention, I think too often we're speaking with maybe one particular persona. So where is our easiest entry point? And we're talking to that individual, and we might have a champion, and oh man, this person loves our technology or loves our thing, our product, right? But for schools, there are so many decision makers and so many stakeholders involved in the decision-making process. And I think too often we have single or maybe a couple champions on an account, and we're not multi-threading those accounts, and we're not getting in front of the board and the superintendent and some of the, higher level individuals who actually have to sign the checks. And so that's one of the first questions I have for a sales rep when I'm getting into an account. They say, hey, you want to come to a board meeting? I said, I'd love to come to your board meeting. Who knows us there? Because if it's one person, then we're not ready to come to a board meeting, and we're going to look like fools. we need to make the board advocates and ambassadors before we ever are in a public open meeting. They need to be experts before we ever show up. And so how are we doing that? I think we have to get real creative in doing that. I think it's a very delicate dance in a school district, but I think there are so many decision makers, and that could be parents, that could be kids, like I just talked about, that could be board members, it could be teachers unions. Again, really understanding the context of each district and each decision, and who needs to be at the table.
That is such a good point. I mean, the way I think about it is, so what's the most important conversation in your whole sales process? It's not your first exploratory conversation. It's not your presentation. It's probably not even your presentation to some to the cabinet or whoever it might be, because by that time you've got investment. I think the most important conversation is one that you're not in. So it's you just pitched that stakeholder who you hope will become that champion. That champion will never be as knowledgeable about your product or as passionate about it as you are. When they turn around and they go to their superintendent and say, hey, at this meeting, this thing looks really cool, I think we should consider investing in it. Superintendent asks one hard question and they say, and then they start thinking, I'm putting myself at risk here, thinking about their job status. Like, never mind, I'm just going to go back to what I'm doing. But there are so many ways you can equip that person. And this is where technology becomes super valuable. We've kind of, it doesn't even have to be AI. Arm them with a video where you're talking about, pass a video through them that they can then use to share. There are all kinds of really cool materials and tools that you can use to enable them to have that conversation. Again, never as passionately, never as knowledgeably as you will, but get them a little bit closer.
Can I add one more piece to this thing that I often see we forget about, and that's the sales. We think the sales done when we get the PO and it's whatever. No, we got to go down. We got to go down to purchasing. We got to find out who the purchasing people are. That's where the rubber meets the road, because a lot of deals don't happen because we lose the PO or something happens. So just a little idea of over 30 years of doing this work, that we got to include the purchasing department in every single deal that we do for the reps to understand. Because if we take a box of donuts down there to them, let them know who you are, because they're key people in the process. The other thing I'll share with everybody out there is, the one thing that we always get asked about is, how do we take reps, that are used to calling at site levels, from having a conversation with teachers and with administrators at the site, to more of a C-suite conversation? How do I start getting my reps to start talking about what they talk about, what they say to superintendents and assistant superintendents and C-suite people? A lot of them can't make that leap.
Yeah.
So I throw that out there. What are your thoughts on that? How do you get guys up to speed on that deal?
I spend a lot of time doing exactly what you're talking about, talking with our sales team, explaining to them who might be on a school board, and how they're going to talk to those individuals, and what public meetings are like, and how to talk to a superintendent who, in many cases, not always, but many cases, has some ego in that room and has already been through pitch after pitch, year after year. How do you stand out in a way that's respectful and shows value? And we spend that's probably my number one training point with our sales team right now in the last year or so, is really unpacking failures and trying to understand, where do we go wrong. And oftentimes, Tom, to your point, it's when we make that leap to the executive level, to the C-suite, so to speak, of schools, where there's an intimidation factor, there's a vocabulary issue. I mean, we're not even oftentimes speaking the same language, because they don't understand their world, and maybe they haven't done the right amount of homework with their internal champion to know how to approach the topic to the powers that be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes back to the empathy, and we've talked about this a few times. There's like some adage: you're not just selling to a company, or in this case, a school district. You are selling to a person, and that while that school district has its priorities and its needs, and they're outlined in some strategic plan somewhere, that person, they have their priorities and needs. And it's really helpful to at least try to get to understand, what's this person concerned about? And I mean personally, what are they concerned about on behalf of their school district? But what are they concerned about themselves? Are they concerned that they're going to get fired if they make the wrong decision? Do they have a chance to get promoted if they make the right decision? These are school districts, like that kind of stuff tends not to happen too much. But where are they putting themselves personally at risk? Where might they personally get rewarded? Really think through that to develop that sense of empathy. That's going to work whether you're talking with someone in your very first conversation, or the superintendent in the C-suite, wherever it might be.
Yeah, some of our superintendents are trying to go from small districts to large districts
Sure.
or
Yeah.
medium
They've got
district to
aspirations.
mega
Yep.
district or whatever, right?
Yep.
Maybe we can help them out on our LinkedIn for goodness sake, and we can just follow them and share their stories and do it with integrity, do it with fidelity. We're doing it because we actually care about them as human beings. I mean,
Yep.
there is a lot of trust involved in this, and we need to know their goals.
I want to say one other thing is someone mentioned earlier of all the stakeholders, and Tommy, I think you mentioned it, all the stakeholders in these decisions, these consideration decisions. There are many of them. Tom, you mentioned, procurement, like that's a key stakeholder. Of course, the cabinet, the board. More and more, at least here in California and some other states that I'm aware of, the labor partners are becoming even more vocal and active stakeholders, taking an actual stake in the decision whether to procure a new piece of technology or whatever the product might be. I think that can be great. It presents an opportunity to win over another group of folks, and perhaps another person. But it's something, again, here in California, you absolutely have to consider them as being at the table, whether they literally are or not, and really be thinking through what are their priorities, what are their concerns, what are their needs.
These are all amazing points. And if you have questions, feel free to drop in the chat and we will get to them. I think of the point you brought up, Jill, of multi-threading, right? Understanding there's not just one buyer, and really it's a people first, we're in a people first market with education. That's the goal there. And I mean, those are a lot of things we talk about in our academies, how to multi-thread, how to even change your message based on who you're talking to. But a lot of that it's a slower approach. It isn't just the quick. I can't tell you how many emails I got as an administrator where like I'm too busy to like look at your features or video or demo or whatever it is. Like help me solve the problem right in front of me. And so I think these are all really good common mistakes. And so on the flip side of that, what are things you would suggest people and reps and companies do that are the opposite of those mistakes? And we've touched lead with empathy, lead with kind of outcomes, impact studies. But what would you say are things that companies are doing differently than their competitors, where they are winning in today's market? What does that look like on the flip side?
You're not going to be able to see things. I had the opportunity to shadow some of our account executives when I was newer at the company. And one of my favorite calls was with the school district. And it was a smaller district, and they had a very, very small budget. And they were talking about access control. And again, I'm in the security industry. They were talking about all these very basic, lower level items that they had been considering and prioritizing. And then they're talking about advanced weapons screening, which is, our products. And I listened to the rep, and they said at the end of the call, I don't know if you're ready for us right now. I think there are better ways for you to keep your students and your staff safer. And we'll be here when you get to the development in your plan, and they meant it. And I just think that is hard to find. That is unusual. And I think it makes it made an impact on me. I'm sure it made an impact on the customer. Because they really wanted to help them solve their problem. They really wanted to do the thing that they said they wanted to do, which is, in our case, keep people safer. And there were better ways to do that with their budget and with their constraints, So being ready to walk away, and that's not easy with all the pressures Tom brought up about, investors and quotas. And I trust me, I get it. But if you can sleep at night and know that you're actually providing something good for customers, or allowing them to take a beat before you provide that thing, I think that really sets sellers apart and makes them partners in a real way.
Jill, so that's the ultimate, right? We just said it right there, because that's the ultimate about this business. I believe really supports strategic selling and consultative selling. We have to do that. So to your point, we all strive to be trusted advisors. You guys put a notch in your holster now, because now you took a step towards being a trusted advisor, doing the right thing. Right. So that's the goal. So the two things I learned from doing this business for 30 years, number one, always have the superintendent's back, protect the superintendent, make the superintendent look good. I'm just cut it down to the basics. Make them look good wherever it is you're trying to sell them. Become a trusted advisor, do the right thing. Maybe they don't need your product this year, but maybe next year they will. And step away and do the right thing. And what are your thoughts on that, Mike?
I think it's all right. I think Jill's example is powerful because it conveys confidence. Look, because it's the right thing, right? Every salesperson walks in and says, well, I'm not trying to sell you something, I'm trying to find a solution that works for you. If you really believe that, there's no way your product is going to work in every single case. So you need to be willing to say, not now. I think it conveys confidence, and it's going to come back around for you like that. They're going to say something. They're going to tell a friend at the next district over. They're going to call you up when they are ready, something. So I think that kind of thing is super powerful. Yeah, I'm going to recall that next time I'm speaking with my folks that, they will not get their hands slapped if they ever decide that is the right thing to say.
You know what? My 30 years of doing this work, guys, my biggest compliment to me is when a soup calls me and says, Tom, we're thinking about buying this product. What do you think?
Oh, that's great.
That. Yeah. I earned that. That took me
Truly
30 years to build that trust, right? That's what we all want to get to, but it took 30 years to get to there. That's my point. How do you cut that cycle down a little bit? So it's like 5 years or maybe where you get to be to that trusted advisor position. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what we need to strive towards.
I guess that then... Please go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike. No. Go ahead. This is off topic.
That gets me thinking. I think we all just need to be students of the industry in which we're working. Yeah, information that's directly relevant to the product or service that you're selling, but just broadly, to be able to empathize, to be able to build trust, you got to really understand this world. When I go to conferences and see sales folks who sit at their booth through the entire conference, whether there's someone around or not, whether it's a exhibiting time or not, it drives me nuts. Go to a session, sit and listen, ask a thoughtful question. Now, do the thing where you ask a thoughtful question, you say the company you're from, and they go, "Oh, who's that?" But you are there to learn. Go to a session and actually, take in as much information as you can about this industry. It's only going to help you empathize again and build trust with the folks you're talking to.
I wanted to add, I don't know if I put this under good behavior, if you talk about the positives, or bad behavior when I think about people who have abused this, but in any event, it's the way in which you talk about competition. So for those districts who have already invested in something that may be a competitor, trashing them or making them feel like idiots, like I don't see how anyone could expect that to work when it comes to sales, but I've seen it. I've seen from competitors emails that school districts have gotten and things that others have said, like, I can't believe you chose XYZ. But what are you going to shame them into buying your product? Again, have the superintendent's back. Hey, let's leverage this investment. You've already made it. You've already made the decision. You've already made the investment. And I just think that it leaves a horrible taste in your mouth as a cabinet member to receive anything negative about the stuff that you're proud to do. We're doing these things because we're proud of them, right? We're making these decisions as school leaders because we think they're correct. And to have someone come in and say, "Oh, wow, you really made the wrong choice. You chose our competitor, and let me tell you why you should choose us, and let me tell you why blah blah blah," that may even be accurate. But the way in which you have those conversations, man, I've seen some stinky ones, real bad.
And can totally backfire. We know, I forget what the psychological phenomenon is, but it's that when people make a decision and then are presented with evidence that would suggest, a contrary decision would have been best. Whether they voted for one person, then found something out, or they made a purchase and then found something out, that often ends up just strengthening that investment
They double down. They double down.
Yeah. Exactly. So you may well actually just send them running back into the arms of the folks whose product they just purchased.
You might
it also weakens you. Yeah. It just makes it's
one
petty.
of the things I was going to say, Joe, I learned a long time ago that you got to go with a superintendent. Now, maybe I'm old school. Maybe it's changing today's market with more board members getting more involved with micromanaging school systems. But going to the board, let's talk about that for a second. Going to a board member for me is a kiss of death. If you're trying to go around the soup to get something done with a board member, I don't know about you guys, but my experience was not a good one when people try to do
I've never seen that end well.
Even more broadly, I maybe this varies state to state. I have personally not had much success cultivating board member relationships, at least at first. After getting to know folks in the relevant department and cabinet, perhaps the superintendent, certainly it's great if you're allowed to at that point in a procurement process. But I don't attend board association conferences. I just have not found that to be an effective way to start conversations.
I'll push back a little bit and just say I see that I agree with you when it comes to origination of an account. But for renewals, in our case, as a subscription,
Sure.
I think that finding a way to that board once they're already a customer is
Yeah.
huge, because a lot of times there's longevity, and some of our board members are around a lot longer than our superintendents right now with the current tenure of superintendents. And so I do like to have at least one or two champions on the board once I'm already in, to your point.
That makes a ton of sense. I mean, every time I meet a board member, I thank them for what they're doing, just because it's a thankless role. Yeah, lots of reasons why people wouldn't want to be a board member, and I really appreciate what they do. But that sounds right. Originating and starting a conversation, maybe not as much, but certainly down the road, and especially when you get to the point of renewal. Yeah.
Hey, Tommy, can I ask a question not only to these two, but to the folks listening on the call as well? Solutions, and right now during these tough economic times, solutions that make sense. Like, what would you lead with I think it makes sense in some cases. I think people are tired, particularly tech people, of the per student fee of the SaaS model, where you pay $5 for this and $5 for that and $10 for this and $15, and it adds up to $500 a kid. What about going back to the old perpetual license model where they own it with a maintenance fee? Bringing that as part of the conversation. What about putting a performance clause in there? We make these thresholds, or we don't do it, you don't pay us. Come up with what are you guys thinking about? What you should be talking to soups about that would make it more enticing for them to consider purchasing your product, that would kind of put icing on the cake. You know what I mean? Some things that you could would be different. I don't know. Think about it.
I mean, these are, and again, I'm not sure exactly who's.
I'm a soup, Mike. I'm a soup. Pitch me your stuff, and then how would you entice me to want to do business with you as a next step? You know what I mean? How are you different from everybody else out there offering the same stuff? You know,
So I personally am willing to engage in something that's risk sharing, performance based. I think you got to be able to do it. I think in the rare case that, assuming you have confidence in your project, in the rare case that you don't hit the hurdles, you'll probably get another chance. And if you don't, then you get fired and you come back again once you've improved the product. So I am cognizant of the fact that, I can sit here and tell a sales rep, performance-based contracts, you got to do it. And they're like, sorry, my leadership will never go for it. So if you can advocate for that upward to your leadership, if you have sales or executives on this call who would be willing to do it, it sounds frightening because it's uncertain revenue, but I think it pays off, and I think you might have to do it again in this new era. You might not have a choice. I ducked your invitation to sell you what I was doing here.
I like it.
I got it.
I'd say we get creative sometimes with out clauses, and so maybe we're gonna have you sign a multi-year deal, but if you're not happy at the end of this particular performance period, no harm, no foul, or we can walk away amicably, and that's unusual for a lot of software companies, I think.
I saw this once. It actually goes into an agreement that we would sit down and set goals together at the outset of the relationship. So this is more of a service relationship than a product, but you could probably figure out a way to do it with a product. So during the contracting process, you're not saying we will hit this number, but you say we will sit down and set goals together. And at the end of some pretty short period of time, a year, maybe 6 months, if we haven't hit the goals that we agreed that we would be hitting, you can get out of the contract. Maybe you have a month to cure that or whatever, address it, but they can get out of the relationship. Again, I realize that's totally risky, but you're inviting them to sit down with you. It conveys a ton of confidence. If you're thoughtful about setting those goals together, you probably shouldn't put yourself in a position where you're unlikely to meet them. And I think, that really built a lot of trust.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, if you came to me with a proposal and you say, look, it's going to be performance based, we're going to agree to these terms, we're going to do a different pricing model. It's going to be very different. You maybe go back to the old days, or maybe it's just a different out of the box pricing model, and you're going to come in with a good price, and it's going to come in, and we're going to sustain it this way, and we know the funding source is going to be there. I'm just trying to get people to understand how you differentiate yourself in this market. How do you come to me with something that nobody's really offering right now? And what could that look like? You know what I mean? Just think out of the box for a minute. And that goes to the people who are listening as well. Put something in the chat and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, I think you got to be creative, right? Tough market, and you got to be able to adapt. And a lot of times, people who adapt in the most creative way first, are the ones that succeed in that regards. But as go ahead, Jill. You want to add anything there?
Yeah, I was just going to say to our people out there in selling roles that are right on the front lines, I think that I would say don't be fearful of being creative. Someone on the sales leadership team, I want you to come to me with some weird idea. I want to get weird together to serve a customer because that means I have a new customer. And so let's talk about it. Don't be afraid to bring I think it's really a sign of a very healthy sales leadership team that you can bring forth those ideas and rap about them internally to try and discuss, okay, I know this about my customer. I've done this much research. I know their budget, or I know their fears, or whatever. They're up for their own contract renewal and we need to match their terms or whatever. And get creative with your leadership, because if you're in leadership and you're not recognizing the need for that right now, then that's a much bigger problem. So I'm hungry for that. When our reps come to us on deal desk and we talk through, like, oh man, that's a different idea. Let's check it out. Let's chase it down. Let's see if the district goes for it, and let's ask them what they need. A lot of times I'm surprised by how willing legal can be to kind of go around some of these,
Yep.
implied hurdles
Yep.
that are
I've had that.
manageable.
I've had that experience, and that then points to competitive intelligence. Really understand what your competition is doing, how they're contracting, what kind of pricing schemes and other contract terms that they're using, and then you can creatively look for ways to make take some very small risks that they're not taking.
Yeah, I've heard it said that the best ideas were crazy until they are right, and then we celebrate them as great ideas, but it took someone stepping out and taking a crazy idea and making it work. Let's jump to this question. So, what's maybe one assumption that people make about the K through 12 market today that you think is a lot of people out there? They view this as right. They view this as correct, but you would actually say, no, I actually think we're wrong here. What's one assumption about today's market that you would say is incorrect?
Mostly I'm thinking what you hear is right, and it's actually more right than you think. Like when you hear sales cycles are really long, yep, and even longer than you think. What's not necessarily well? Look, I think it's despite all that, I think it's still a great place to do business. Of course, it's a great industry to do business because you can feel great about what you're doing, but there is a lot of promise. Kids have to get educated. We have to come up with more innovative, thoughtful ways to instruct kids, to run school districts, everything surrounding, staff school districts, everything else. There have been, many, many very successful companies and very successful people coming out of these companies. So I don't know. I guess I'm just saying, don't give up on it. I very, very happily spent my career in this space, even if there were some times when I was, beating my head against the steering wheel.
I would just say fewer and fewer purchases in a school system are made by catalog or click and go. I mean, even all over the board, from curriculum to staffing solutions to, you name it, whatever the thing is that you might be selling, expect it to go through the ringer, expect it to be tested, expect for it to be, to provide references, to provide local references, to provide, even if it seems like it might have been a light lift just a few years ago, they are really putting us through it now. And you should be ready for that. There has to be some endurance in that process.
Yeah.
Can I add one really key piece right now that I've seen in the marketplace and in the space in the last couple of years since the pandemic? The successful reps are the ones making face-to-face calls. They're not doing Zooms like this. They're out in the field. They're knocking on doors. They're having lunch with people, and they're making those human connections. Those are the ones that are having success. I can just share that with you right now, overall, generally speaking.
Piggybacking on that, Tom, I'd say I'm a big believer in conferences. A well-executed conference can be super productive. People say, is it a good conference or is it a bad conference? You can make it a good conference. Again, I've seen people that execute at conferences very, very poorly, but a well-executed conference, and we could probably do a whole webinar on just what a well-executed conference is. Most of the clients I've signed on in various roles over the last couple decades I either met or at least cultivated the relationship at a conference.
And you mentioned this earlier, going to the sessions. You know why else conferences are valuable? Because I've been out of the classroom and out of a leadership position in a school longer and longer every year,
Yep.
right? So how do we keep the pulse of what is important and what is at the forefront of the market is by going there and actually caring about the answer to that question,
Yep.
going into the sessions and learning and being a lifelong learner yourself. It matters to educators. These are people who have invested their entire careers into teaching and learning. For you to sit in your booth with your arms crossed is
Yep.
not a good look. It
Check
is
an
not a good
email.
look.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
First of all, I wouldn't go to a conference that offered booths. I wouldn't do those anymore. You got to be in front of leaders and make decisions. That's where I'd spend my marketing dollars. I wouldn't spend money on a booth.
Fair. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
I've started, I don't go to conferences now unless I'm speaking in some capacity. And
There you
so
go.
that was it, so it's more of a symbiotic relationship. You know what? I'll give whatever I can, whether it's about the security industry or it's about women in leadership, whatever the conference happens to be, I'll give and I don't expect to be paid, but then I want to get too. I want to go to some other sessions and I want to understand and I want to learn. And then you're going to meet people in there who have common interests and are like-minded and are trying to solve similar problems. Just by design, that's what the conference is there for. So yeah, I totally agree, Mike.
Echoing that, you're absolutely right. I mean, attend a conference, that's great. Man, if you're speaking at a conference, it just shifts that dynamic around so dramatically. I mean, Jill, you can capably get speaking engagements based on your background and credentials. I have to partner with someone. But if I were just starting to market a product, I would find every conference that might have something to do with my products space, get every single one of their presentation submission deadlines, find a partner who is interested, a district partner or someone else who's interested in presenting to me and applying for every single one of those.
Our customers want to speak. If they're proud of what they're doing,
yeah, exactly.
Then give them a microphone because they're going to be a much better seller than any of us.
Yep.
Let them talk about how they're actually implementing your solution and why it works to their peers. There's maybe nothing more powerful than that, I think, in the sales process. And conferences are a great place to do that, to showcase those people who are using your products.
I love that. Let your clients speak for you. That's good.
Oh.
This has been such a great conversation. Let's end with this last question. And this is kind of more of a summary kind of, but what new sales professional just joined a company, first couple of weeks in, what would be your advice in today's market? What's your best advice for that person starting off?
It's a ton. We've related a ton. I would say take some time. It's going to be so tempting to start hitting the phones, hitting the pavement, whatever it is, knocking on doors. Take some time, learn as much as you can about the industry, about your territory or whatever, however that's allocated, the very specific folks you're calling on. Slow down, take time, and just learn absolutely immerse yourself. Do everything you can to start to get close to becoming an expert and then start in on that go-to-market process.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I agree about the research and just really understanding your territory and in your particular region. Who was superintendent of the year in the states that you're serving, and why? What are their interests?
What was so great about what they did?
Yeah. Yeah, what was the thing that they did? Was it related to what you're doing, or is it something that's very off the path of what you're trying to sell? If you're looking at a tech product, go find out who was the tech innovator of the year, or who was actually do that research and understand who are the first movers, who are the early adopters, who are those more risk-taking superintendents, who's at the end of their career and maybe has a little less to lose than the newest superintendent, or who is trying to make a name for themselves. Understand the players, because it is a very political landscape too. And understanding how you can serve their goals is a lot bigger than you think in terms of the equation.
Yeah, for me, guys, you said it all right there, Jill and Mike. It's be a student of the game. Just understand the rules and get into the game and be a lifelong learner and understand. Because we just in the 45 minutes we've glossed over about 10 different subjects. Can you imagine a new rep coming in with all the stuff we just talked about would blow them away? So we've got over 100 years of experience here, probably between us 3 or 4, right? And I'm just saying, my point is, there's so many layers to this to this industry, they have to become lifelong learners. They got to accept the challenge. They got to be student of the game. You got to get into it and be real about it. And I really do think that for transitioning educators that want to go into this space, same thing. They know the school side, but they don't know how to sell. We got to coach them up on that, right? So it's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much, Tommy.
Yeah, I want to thank both Jill and Mike. This has been an insightful conversation. So thank you for your time, and thanks for everyone that joined us tonight as well. I think we just hit it there. I mean, when the market is tough and when times are tough, it's not the time to pull back on training and learning. It's the time to double down and it makes sure your tools are sharper in a tougher market. And so, I mean, that's really why we created the K-12 Impact Academies for sales, for client success, and then our leadership track. And so, we found that the challenge sometimes isn't necessarily the product or solution you're offering, but it's knowing how to navigate the K-12 market, understand district priorities, and build trusted and long-term partnerships. So if you're watching this and interested and want to learn more, we'd love to have a conversation. As well as, I plugged one before, but we have a couple awesome free webinars coming up. And so you can scan the QR code on the screen here. One on client success in July, another one on AI in August, and then I mentioned before the impact study one in October. So take the time right now to RSVP. But thank you so much for an amazing evening, and thank you to Mike and Jill.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Have a good week.
Take care.
You.
Adios.